Chapter 346, Beginning of the Assault, 4. Well fuck. Staring at the barrel of the gun right in front of me, the world around me froze. Despite of the fact that I had a gun barrel aimed at my head, I was calm. My eyes paused on the hole of the narrow barrel where I could see a small energy blast forming at the very end of it. Upon closer look, I noticed a small bundle of spherical mana agglomerating towards the very end of the barrel, forming a small pink ball. Not taking my eyes away from the ball, the chip inside of my head started processing at full power, and all sorts of different scenarios materialized inside of my head. All the scenarios had different survivability probabilities. Some high, some low. All the processing and analyzing happened within a short second, and before the ball had fully formed, I already knew what to do. And I really wanted to conserve my mana. In the end, after simulating the many scenarios inside of my head, I decided to go with the most efficient method. Although I really didn't want to do this as I had to conserve as much mana as possible, I was left with no choice but to do this. Slowly lifting my head, I inwardly muttered, "The one." The moment my words faded, the Durgar standing opposite to me abruptly came to a halt as the hand that held onto the gun shook. The energy beam that was forming at the end of the barrel suddenly twisted and disappeared into the air like smoke. Calmly placing my left hand on the gun, I moved it slightly. Then, leaning my head backward, I headbutted the Durgar right in the face. Hyuk! Thud! Falling but first onto the ground, the Durgar let out a strange sound and let go of the gun. Without giving him any chance to recover, I stomped my foot on the ground. Spurt! A gory scene appeared in my vision as blood and pieces of flesh covered the ground below me. Unemotionally staring at the scene below me, deactivating the effects of the one, I walked towards my sword and picked it up. Tapping on my bracelet using my left hand, taking a potion out from my dimensional space, I uncapped the lid and chugged it down. Gulp.
Ha!
Downing the whole potion in one go, my shoulder slowly started to heal. Unfortunately, the process was not a quick one as my whole shoulder had almost gotten blown away. It was so bad that I may as well have had my whole arm amputated. At this point, it was practically useless. According to my estimates, I would need at least a couple of hours for it to fully heal. Normally I wouldn't have had a problem with this, but that was on normal occasions. Unfortunately for me, this was no longer a normal occasion. With everything that was going on, time was of the essence, and the fact that my dominant hand was no longer working was a cause of concern. To think that things have gone wrong this early into the plan. From how I practically lost my right arm to how I used more mana than I had originally anticipated. Things were not going as smoothly as I had anticipated. Bang! Fortunately, this was only coming from my end as Angelica swiftly dealt with the last remaining Durgar. Crashing onto the side of the walls, blood splattered everywhere, and a gory scene once again presented itself before my eyes. Once she disposed of the Durgar, turning her head to face my direction, the first she noticed was the state of my shoulder. Raising her hand, she pointed at it. "What happened to you?" "A little accident," I replied whilst heading towards the alarm system of the place. The one that the guard had previously pointed out to me during the tour. Once I arrived at the place, turning to face Angelica, I nudged her with my head. Security should already be aware of the fact that the surveillance system is down. Wait at the door while I try to activate the system. Kill anyone that comes in. Around 30 to 40 seconds had passed since we attacked and disposed of the Durgars in the room. If my estimate was not wrong, within a couple of seconds, a bunch of guards would quickly head in our direction. Given that I had to activate the system as well, and the fact that my right hand was no longer working, I could only leave the matter of defending the place to Angelica. Without saying anything, much to my relief, Angelica understood the situation and headed toward the entrance of the facility. Briefly glancing at Angelica's parting figure, I focused my attention back on the emergency system and tried my best to recall all of the information that the guard had previously said when I was here. According to what he said, the system activated whenever it feels like an explosion might happen by measuring the mana that is lingering in the room. Therefore, if I want it to activate, I need to mess with the sensor. Fortunately, I didn't have a hard time recalling what the guard had said. With the aid of the chip inside of my head, remembering word for word what the guard had said not too long ago was not hard, as I went straight into action not long after. It should be over there. Scanning the area I was in, I immediately spotted the mana sensory system. It wasn't far from where I was, and it also wasn't hard to spot. With a label right above it, I would be dumb not to spot it. 00H, 00S, 21S. Checking my watch and noticing that I barely had any time left, I rushed towards the sensor. Assuming that the sensor scans then mana density that is lingering inside of the whole room, I'd estimate that the sensor will only activate once the mana that is dispersed throughout the whole room reaches a certain level. If I channel my mana right above the sensor, I should be able to distort the data and replicate a scenario where it looks like an explosion is happening. As my thoughts were running wild, I soon arrived before the sensor. Bang! But just as I arrived at the sensor, a terrifying explosion resounded from behind me. Without turning back, I knew that security had finally arrived. Without wasting any time, I raised my left hand and touched the sensor with my finger. Upon touching the sensor, I channeled all the mana inside of my body towards it, and a white thread that detached from my body sank into the sensor. Bang, bang. While I was busy trying to interfere with the sensor, the sound of fighting behind me rang even more powerfully as Angelica's demonic energy shrouded the whole room. "What are you doing, demon? What have you done? Why are you interfering with us?" The angered shouts of the Durgars behind me powerfully rang throughout the whole facility. Come on, come on. Staring at the sensory system, I fully concentrated on the task at hand and channeled even more mana into the system. 00H, 00M, 09S. Briefly glancing at my watch, my heart rate sped up and I felt a strong sense of urgency. Although I had managed to do the most important step of the plan, which was to gather the attention of everyone, that was the problem. Douglas had still not attacked yet, meaning that everyone's attention was on me. If the security system did not work, I would find myself in a scenario where I would end up facing the Elders of Inferno. Only when the security system activated would I truly be saved, albeit temporarily. Ding, die. Just when I thought I wouldn't have enough time to activate the system, a large chime rang out and red lights flashed. Rumble. What followed after was a small rumbling sound as the doors of the facility started to shut down. The system activated. Hurry! The moment the doors started closing, the Durgars became alarmed and attacked even more fiercely. But how could Angelica let them? Channeling all of her demonic energy, raising her hand, a small ball materialized in her hand. The ball was about the size of a baseball, but the energy that emanated from it was no joke. With threads of demonic energy encircling it, Angelica pushed the ball forward, towards the attacking Durgars. Shh! *T. Move back. Realizing the threat of the ball, all Durgars moved backward and tried to avoid the attack. It had to be noted that this was a full-powered attack coming from a count-ranked demon. The energy contained within the attack was not someone that anyone could take. Clank. Before Angelica and I could see whether the attack had any effect or not, the doors of the room shut down. With my hand still channeling mana in the sensory system, I looked at Angelica and muttered. Did we do it? Boom. Before Angelica could even reply, a terrifying explosion rang from outside of the facility and the whole room shook. I guess we did. Still touching the sensory system, my shoulders relaxed a little. It has finally started. The war between the dwarves and Inferno had officially begun. Moments before the explosion. What in the world? Is this what I think it is? Crossing through the illusion set up at the end of the tunnel, Douglas, alongside the many others that had followed him, were left speechless by the scene that they were presented with. Deeply etched into the walls was an enormous structure resembling a large gate with all sorts of engravings by its side. The infrastructure was enormous, and standing outside it were 3 tall large statues, depicting 2 Duergar killing a dwarf. It didn't take a genius to realize where they were, and the moment they did, the faces of everyone present changed. Some of the faces of the individuals paled significantly while the faces of others shone brightly. Still, their appearance did not go unnoticed. The moment they appeared, the gates of the enormous structure shut down. What followed after was even more alarming. The sides of the structure opened up and cannon-like devices slowly came into everyone's view. Get ready. Staring at the cannons in the distance, Douglas's face became incredibly serious. Extending his hand forward, a terrifying pressure suddenly engulfed the entire area as the mana in the air thickened up and agglomerated towards his hand, coating it completely. A similar scene appeared in the distance as small colorful spheres made out of mana entered the barrels of the cannons, converging towards the middle where a large colorful sphere formed. 00H, 00M, 01S. As both sides accumulated energy, glancing at his watch, with a grave face, Douglas pushed his palm out. A whistling sound arose, and what followed after was a boundless force. Like a tsunami, the force obliterated anything that crossed its path. In response to Douglas's attack, the cannons also shot out a fierce attack. All of them whistled down at the same time. A rumbling thunder roar resounded continuously. Different colors lightly flashed across the surroundings. Immediately after, the 2 forces met in front of everyone's eyes. Boom! A terrifying explosion instantly rang out, and energy ripples spread from the point of collision. The tough ground immediately burst apart, covering the place with dust. Om, Om. At the same time, emerging from out of a portal, were 5 figures. Wai, wai. The sonorous sound of sirens rang, as the whole facility flashed in red. Staring at the unfamiliar environment, Jurnus alongside the others questioned. Where are we? Standing opposite of the others, Waylon waited for everyone to appear before answering. Rather than saying it multiple times, it was better to only just say it once. Om. It didn't take long for the last person to exit out of the portal. Once the last member stepped out of the portal, Waylon looked at everyone and smiled. You guys must be confused about our current location, right? Without giving the others a chance to reply, taking notice of a small piece of paper that was resting on the table of the room, Waylon raised his brows and picked it up from the table. Opening it, he slowly read through it. After a while, scrunching the paper in his hands, he turned his attention back towards the others. If you guys have still not figured it out, I'll make the instructions quick. Burning the paper in his hand, Waylon pointed at the door of the room. If you haven't still figured it out. Welcome to Inferno. Chapter 347, Planting the Seed of Chaos 1. Inferno, Duergar Council. Sitting in his seat, Orion, one of the Duergar elders, looked around him and asked the rest of the elders present, how is Carl doing? He is currently working on disabling the 3rd beacon. Durara answered from her seat. She sounded very pleased with Carl's work. Do you have any idea when he will get it done? If we get 1 or 2 more beacons disabled, we should be able to completely destroy the barrier of the city. That, I'm not too sure myself. He's just got done with the 2nd beacon, so I reckon it would be done within the week. Durara replied with a tight frown on her face. Because Carl requested for him to not be monitored or bothered while he was working, no one actually knew how far he was in the project. Since he had proven himself by deactivating the first and second beacons, the elders had no qualms with the fact that they couldn't monitor him. Furthermore, Carl's request wasn't strange. Many of the Durgars present were engineers, and they all knew just how important keeping their blueprints and projects a secret was. It was their life's work. No one would like it for their work to be seen by others. All that mattered to them was that he deactivated the beacons. Having already inspected his strength, they weren't worried about Carl running away, as they had set up multiple guards way above his rank to monitor him. From what I heard, Carl said that the process of deactivation differs per beacon. That is why it is taking time for him to fully extract the memories from Jomnuk and process them in time. I see, looks like that bastard was a thorough one. With both hands on the table, Orion mumbled to himself. If he manages to get it done by the end of the week, we should start getting ready. Turning to face one of the Durgars standing on the other side of the hall, Orion decided to give out orders. Send a message to all members. Orion stood up and clenched both of his fists. Within a week, when the barrier is finally breached, I want them to be ready to assault Henneler from the inside. A colorless hue mixed with black threads of energy expanded from his body as his cold voice rang throughout the room. It's time we finally got rid of those bastards. Bang. But just as his words faded, with a loud bang, a Durgar rushed into the room. Before the elders could say anything about the rude intrusion, the Durgar shouted in wild panic. We've got an urgent report. The artifact testing facilities have been breached. The artifact testing facilities? Orion's brow raised in surprise. He seemed relaxed despite hearing of an intruder in the artifact testing area. Who's the idiot trying to breach the artifact testing facilities? That place was like a prison. The moment it was breached, although no one could go in, no one could also go out. To Orion, whoever was trying to breach the place seemed to be an idiot. Thus, he was completely relaxed. It was also because of this that he started to glare at the Durgar that had so rudely barged into the room. Why have you barged into this place to report such a small matter? His cold voice entered the ears of the Durgar. The latter froze on the spot. His pupils instantly dilated and a sense of death washed over his body as he fumbled on his words, struggling to form a sentence. But, K. Carl is there, sir. Eventually, with shaking legs, using all of his willpower, the Durgar managed to complete his sentence. However, as soon as his words faded, a palpitating, almost terrifying chill spread throughout the whole room as the countenances of all the elders present changed horribly. What did you just say? The first one to recover was Durara, who immediately stood up with an alarmed look. Did you just say that Carl was inside of the artifact testing facility? Speak. Why, yeah. Subjected to Durara's terrifying glare, the Durgar could only helplessly nod his head. Oh no. Getting confirmation from the Durgar, Durara turned her head and looked at the other elders present in the room. Bang. Without needing to be told what to do, one of the elders disappeared from the hall. A loud banging noise resounded as the door of the hall smacked against the side of the walls. Once the elder left, a grave and solemn atmosphere permeated the room. Shh! *T, how did those bastards manage to get to them? Smacking his fist against the table, Orion raised his voice. Didn't we increase the security around Carl? How in the world could this have happened? Given how important of a figure Carl was, there was no way they would just let him go as he pleased without a bodyguard. Furthermore, everyone in the artifact testing facility should have been filled with loyal Durgars. Given how important artifacts were, the elders weren't just going to let anyone test them. They were Durgars that had been selected after a tough screening. For an incident to have happened there out of all places was odd. Did one of us betray us? It was the first thought that Orion had as he scanned the room. It was the most plausible outcome. You all, huh? But just as he was about to voice out his concerns, out of nowhere, the base's defensive system activated. Ding. What's going on? What is happening? The moment the defensive system activated, everyone grew even more alarmed. Tapping onto the table in front of him, one of the Durgars swiped his hand and a large holographic image of the outside of the facility appeared before everyone. How could this be? We're under attack. It was then that everyone instantly understood what was going on. They stood up in unison and stared at the powerful energy blast that was headed towards the direction of the facility. Everyone, get ready. Sound the defensive system and warn everyone to be ready to fight. The Durgars in the room weren't leaders for nothing. Upon realizing just what kind of situation they were in, instead of panicking, they all calmly gave out orders and rushed out of the hall. The only one who remained in the hall was Orion, whose eyes remained glued on the energy blast headed for the base. Before long, the energy blast connected with the cannon blasts. Boom! A thunderous explosion sounded and the whole place shook. With his feet steady on the ground, Orion's face sank as he darkly muttered. How dare you? Why? What followed after the explosion was the sound of alarms ringing. Still channeling my mana at the sensor of the room, I glanced in Angelica's direction. Indifferently walking in my direction, Angelica's footsteps halted right as she was a few meters away from me. What should we do now? We wait. I softly replied. In response, Angelica cocked her head to the side. Confused by my answer. Wait?
Yeah.
We wait for Waylon to come to pick us up. Pausing there, my brows suddenly knit in thought as I muttered to myself. Talking about Waylon, I hope he got my message. When setting the portal in the other room, I made sure to leave behind a note on the desk. On it were a couple of instructions that Waylon had to follow. Alongside it was the location of the artifact testing facility that I was currently in. Aside from that, there was also a small map marked with a few important places like the surveillance room, where the dampening system was, and finally, the location of where the security system was. Our priority was to have all three of those facilities destroyed. Once those three systems were down, it would essentially be equal to crippling Inferno and thus helping us ensure victory. Once Waylon comes to pick us up, the real struggle starts. So, try your best to recover as much as possible. Although you can probably fight against S-ranked Durgars with your bloodline suppression, it's best if you're careful. MHM. Faintly nodding her head, without saying too much, Angelica sat on the ground and started to process the effects of the devil fruit she had just ingested. Slowly, a small black layer formed around her body, enveloping her whole. While Angelica was recovering her demonic energy, with my hand still on the sensor, I tried to move my right arm. KHH. Still nothing. Unfortunately, the moment I tried to move my arm, I felt an electric current run through my body, momentarily paralyzing my movements. It immediately became clear to me that my arm still needed time to recover. The only issue was that I had no time. To make matters worse, since I had to keep injecting mana into the sensor, I couldn't use my other arm to take out any potions. This meant that I was rapidly losing mana. Damn it. Things were not looking good for me at the moment. Standing right by the door that led to the inside of Inferno, Jurnus turned towards Waylon and asked, "What should we do now?" "We're going to split up in 2 groups." Waylon promptly replied to Jurnus's question. As he spoke, the sound of sirens rang in the background, drowning his voice a bit. Split up? Fortunately, everyone in the room was an elite. With their enhanced senses, it wasn't hard for them to make out what exactly Waylon was saying. How should we split up and why do we need to split up? Jurnus asked. In response, Waylon gave a brief reply. We're going to split up in 2 groups. 1 group of 2 and 1 groups of 3. Turning his head toward Ultrich, the orc leader, Waylon continued to give out instructions. Regarding the first group, it will consist of Ultrich and me. Me? Ultrich questioned from the side. Nodding his head slightly, Waylon explained. Yes, I need Ultrich for this part of the plan. He was planning on going to rescue Ren. Since there was a high chance that an elder would show up at the place, in order to increase his chances of survival, Waylon decided to have Ultrich join him to fend off the enemies. While Ultrich and I are busy on our mission, the 3 of you will go to deactivate the surveillance system. Since most of the attention is away from us, do it in the fastest way possible. Our goal is to have the surveillance system destroyed before they notice anything. By destroying the surveillance system, they were essentially buying themselves an advantage. It would basically make the next 2 operations much easier for them, as the Duergars wouldn't be able to coordinate with each other well. I understand the plan somewhat. Listening to Waylon's plans, everyone in the room understood what he was trying to do. Hence, none of them voiced any complaints. Take this. Taking something from his dimensional space, Waylon handed it to Jurnus. What is it? Jurnus questioned as he stared at Waylon's hands, where a small cubic object rested. Upon taking a closer look, Jurnus was able to instantly tell what the device was. Oh. Is this a holographic map? Yes. In there is the location of the surveillance system. Although it is not very detailed, you should be able to make do with that. Thanks to the information that he had gotten from Rin, he was able to pinpoint the exact location of where the important rooms were, and thus marked it on the rough map of Inferno that everyone here used. Yes, this is enough. Putting the device away, a solemn atmosphere prevailed over the room. Having finished what he wanted to say, Waylon checked his watch. Are you guys ready? He asked while moving towards the door of the room. Yes. Taking out their weapons and artifacts, everyone put a small badge by the side of their chest. The moment the artifact touched their chest, the light in the room reflected away from their body and their figures disappeared. Let's go. Putting his hand on the side of the door, a small glow enveloped Waylon's hand as it opened shortly after. Henneler's strongest warriors were going to make a move. Clank. The door closed, and the countdown to the war began. Chapter 348, Planting the Seeds of Chaos, 2. Bang, bang. A loud metallic sound rang as an energy blast shot towards a large metal door. The sound rang in the air for a brief moment before it disappeared completely. What followed after was the cacophonous sound of several alarms ringing, completely drowning out the banging sounds that ensued after repetitive attacks towards the metallic door. Step to the side. Seeing that the attacks were not working, a Duergar stepped up. Holding onto a large metallic barrel in between his armpits, the Duergar channeled his mana towards it. Soon, spherical orbs of mana agglomerated towards the center of the barrel, forming a concentrated ball of energy. The threatening energy expanded in the hull as it steadily increased in size. Before long, once the ball reached a certain size, the Duergar firmly planted both of his feet on the ground and discharged the energy. Boom! What followed after was a terrifying blast that shot towards the massive metal door. A colorful trail of mana traced behind the attack. Once the attack connected with the door, a thunderous sound rang out, and smoke diffused in the air. Did it work? The Duergar who shot the attack wondered out loud as he tried to see through the large cloud of smoke. It's no use. The door is designed to withstand the impacts of SS-ranked individuals. All you're doing is wasting mana. Before the Duergar could get a proper look, a cold and apathetic voice spoke from behind. Turning to the direction where the voice came from, the Duergar's face paled considerably. Lord. Stay put. Scanning the metal door, the mood of the Durgar elder sank. Damn it. Placing his palm on the door, the elder circulated the mana inside of his body towards the palm of his hand and closed his eyes. He was trying to gauge what was going on inside the room. While the elder was busy, the Durgars behind him stood silently with their backs straight, not daring to mouth a single word. After a while, opening his eyes, the elder's face relaxed a little. He's still alive. After having scanned the internal structure of the room, although he wasn't able to tell what exactly was going on inside, he could tell that there were two people alive. Out of the two, one was a demon and the other was Carl. Recognizing Carl's mana signature, the elder was able to tell that he was still alive. At this revelation, he felt a lot more relaxed. As long as he was alive, all was good. However, apart from those two energies, he felt no other energy. This meant only one thing. Every single researcher inside had been killed. Why did a demon betray us? The elder wondered as his brows tightly knit in consternation. For the perpetrator to be a demon, no wonder the Durgars assigned to Carl had failed to protect him. Nobody would have seen it coming. How is the situation going on your side? It was then that a voice suddenly entered the elder's ears. Completely unfazed by the voice, the elder tapped on his ear and responded in a calm tone, Carl is still alive. However, he is currently being held hostage inside of the room with a demon. A demon? The voice sounded a bit surprised. It quickly followed up with a question. So you're saying that the one responsible for this is a demon? That is correct. The elder darkly replied. How is the situation on your side? What exactly is going on? Before arriving at the artifact testing room, the elder had naturally heard a large explosion that seemed to have come from outside the base. Although the elder was curious, he still chose to pursue his role, which was to find out what was going on with the artifact room. Are we under attack? The elder questioned. After a brief moment of silence, the voice responded. Yes. The location of our base has been compromised. We're currently under siege by those bastards. We've called for reinforcements, and have set up the defensive system. At those words, the elder's face sank completely. Our location has been breached? That's impossible. Our dampening system has made it impossible for those bastards to find the coordinates of our base. Unless... A sudden thought struck the elder as he turned his attention back towards the rhinestone door. Unless what? The voice in the elder's ear asked. Frowning, the elder thought for a moment before replying with a deep breath. Unless the one that exposed our location is Carl. That's impossible. The voice spoke after a brief moment of silence. You know full well just how much Carl hates the dwarves. His hatred runs even more deeply than some of us present in the council. How can it be him? Furthermore, he is also responsible for taking down 2 beacons. It can't be possible. You might be right. Pondering over the matter, the elder soon realized the validity of the words presented to him. Given Carl's background, and the fact that he hated dwarves with a passion, the probability of him being the culprit was low. Carl was someone that the dwarves had rejected and scorned due to the various ideas he had proposed in the past. Each dwelling in the neurological field and memory extraction area. Something that was considered taboo to the dwarves. As such, he was treated as an outcast that was left out to rot. If not for them, he would have long died by now. The elder could vividly remember the deep-seated hatred he saw in Carl when he signed the mana contract with the demon. He was there. He had witnessed the whole thing. The fact that he also took down 2 beacons was a testament to his possible innocence. That was, of course, unless he was faking it the whole time. But for him to have been faking it for so long, the elder didn't want to believe it. Giving a skeptical look to the door, the elder massaged his forehead as he tried to think of other possibilities. Just who could it be? Could it be a spy entered Carl's room while he was decoding the beacons? Since the dampening system was turned off in that specific area, it could have happened. But it can't be that either. No one except Carl ever entered that room. The elder shook his head in confusion. He couldn't make heads or tails of the situation. Actually, we already have an idea. What do you mean by that? Why are you telling me this now? Raising his head in surprise, the elder hurriedly asked. I'm only telling you now because I just got a live feed of what happened prior to the attack. The voice paused for a moment. The elder could feel a tone of malice emerge from it. Remember those human bastards that asked for us to let them enter Henneler? The elder's brows knit at those words. Yes, is it related to them? Yes. The voice in the elder's ears deepened. They were the ones that led the attackers towards our location. Moments after they appeared, we were suddenly attacked. Coincidence? No, I don't think so. The elder's face sank once more. Clenching his fists, the elder trembled with uncontrollable rage. To think that those incompetent bastards would scheme against you. Bang! Suddenly, a loud explosion rang in the elder's ear. What is going on? The elder instantly became alarmed. Shh! *T, I'm currently under attack. The dwarves have INF, BZZZZ. Before the sentence could finish, the signal cut off, and the elder was left panicked, wondering what had just happened. Was he trying to say that someone has infiltrated the place? The panic did not last for long. Calming down, the elder tried to make out the last words that the voice in his ear was trying to say. But, before he could even think properly, the hair at the back of his neck rose. Why-ing? Without hesitating, the elder raised his hand. Clang! A loud clashing sound rang out. What followed after was a circular, pressurized wind that expanded from the point of contact between the two forces. KHHH, who? Taking several steps back, the elder stabilized his body and lifted his head up. Upon lifting his head and getting a closer look at who had attacked him, the elder immediately identified the perpetrator of the attack. Human. His eyes narrowed into thin slits. Guess that didn't work. Standing opposite the Durgan elder, Waylon raised his broadsword and once again slashed down. Not wasting a single second. As he swung the sword, a thin coating of mana enveloped the body of the blade. What followed after was a terrifying attack that shot out from the broadsword, headed straight for the elder. Why-ing? Staring at the incoming attack, the elder did not panic in the slightest. Raising his hand, a thin arm bracer appeared on his forearm. Channeling his mana towards the bracer, a thin transparent shield materialized in front of the Durgan elder. Bang! Waylon's attack arrived right as the shield formed. Connecting with the shield, ripples formed around its surface as it completely absorbed the energy of Waylon's attack. Before long, the attack completely dispersed. After absorbing the attack, raising his head, the elder did not waste any time. Extending his hand towards the right, a large hammer appeared in his hand. Gripping on the handle of the hammer, the elder glared at Waylon. Hua! Crying out, the elder raised the hammer in the air and swung downwards with all his might. Bang! The moment the hammer smashed against the ground, it tore apart and an invisible attack shot towards Waylon, who responded in kind. Once again raising his broadsword, letting out a long breath, the mana in the air thickened up considerably and rushed towards his broadsword. It became apparent to everyone in the room that whatever attack Waylon was about to use was going to be extremely powerful. The mana shook around the broadsword, making it look threatening. There was only one problem with this method, however. It was that Waylon would have no time to complete it before the elder's attack reached him. But Waylon was no fool. With his eyes glued on the incoming attack, just as it was about to reach him, he shouted, "Now!" "As you wish." The moments his words faded, a powerful voice rang out with a merry tone, and a large orc suddenly appeared out of thin air. Pressing his toes onto the ground and holding onto an enormous axe, the ground beneath the orc split apart with a loud bang as his body immediately reappeared right in front of Waylon. "Hooah!" Raising his axe, a deep cry powerful enough to shake the air reverberated throughout the whole room as Ultrich slashed down and met the Duergar's attack head-on, in classic Orcish style. The two attacks soon met. Boom. Once the two attacks met, a terrifying energy expanded from the point of contact. What followed after was a thunderous noise that rang throughout the whole area. Leaning forward, with his feet pressed on the ground, the orc turned to face Waylon for a second. "Your turn, human." As he looked at Waylon, slowly, Ultrich was slowly starting to get pushed back. Fine, miniature crevices formed beneath his feet as he tried to hold on. Without answering Ultrich, Waylon turned his attention back towards the elder. With the elder having just attacked, he was wide open. Waylon knew this, and he wasn't going to waste such an opportunity. Leaning his body forward, he slashed down once more. It was a simple slash. It did not look extraordinary or anything of the likes, however, the moment he slashed down, the world came to a standstill. Shirring, sheeing. What the people in the room thought did not come to pass. Instead of a mana-based slash, all they saw was a plain downward swing. Spurt. But it was only a second after, as the sound of blood spilling on the ground reached the ears of everyone present, that they realized it was no regular swing. With his eyes wide open, the elder stared in Waylon's direction with an incredulous look. Many questions entered the elder's mind as he tried to figure out what had just happened. From the very beginning, the elder knew that Waylon was preparing a powerful attack. Therefore, although it looked like he was open, he was prepared to activate his arm bracer. But before he could do that, once Waylon slashed down and the elder prepared to activate his barrier, he saw his blood splatter everywhere. Even during the last moments of his life, the elder couldn't figure out what had just happened. His body began to collapse, the ground becoming increasingly closer. Thud. With a dull thud, the elder fell on the ground. He was dead.
Ha! Ha!
Supporting his body with the broadsword, Waylon heavily gulped for air. Go take care of the others. Although he wanted to rest, turning his head in Ultrich's direction, Waylon nudged him towards the other Duergars present. Got it. Nodding his head silently, Ultrich picked up his axe and headed for the other Duergars. While he was doing that, Waylon walked in the direction of the door and put his palm on it.
Ha! Ha!
Ren, I'm done. A few seconds after his words faded, the door slowly started opening up. Clank. Once the door fully opened, a pale youth slowly walked out. Staring at Waylon, who was standing opposite of him, he muttered in an unhurried tone. Took you long enough. Chapter 349, Crippling the Insides, 1. My brows furrowed as I took a step out of the room. Turning my head and staring towards the right, a scene of carnage appeared in my vision. Holding onto an enormous axe, an orc swung it horizontally, in wild abandon. As the axe moved, it tore the air apart and a whistling sound arose. What followed after was a fountain of blood as the axe split the bodies of several Duergars in two. Is he the one you brought along with you? I asked as I turned to face Waylon again. Taking a closer look at him, my brows jumped up lightly. That aside, what in the world happened to you? Now that I had taken a closer look at Waylon, his complexion seemed to be quite pale. His breathing was rough, and with both of his hands on his knees, he looked to be having a rough time.
Ha! Ha!
Don't worry too much. In order to get rid of the elder, I was forced to use my strongest move. I already drank a potion, I should be good in a bit. What about you? You don't seem to be in optimal shape as well. Waylon said as he pointed at my right arm. Lowering my head and staring at my arm, I helplessly shrugged. It happened because of my inexperience.
Ah!
At my words, Waylon had a sudden look of understanding. He then patted me on the shoulder. Don't worry about it. I've been through it too. If you think Duergars and dwarves are easy to fight just because of their small statures, you're damn wrong. Those bastards could become one hell of a tough opponent. Especially since they seem to have an endless amount of tricks up in their arsenal. I learned this the hard way. I replied with a bitter smile. Just as Waylon said, Duergars were very tricky opponents. Possessing an arsenal packed with a multitude of different artifacts, their attack pattern was almost unpredictable. Unlike when fighting other opponents, I couldn't properly gauge what they would do next, making them that much harder to fight. Furthermore, their cunning tactics that were aimed at my weak points made things even more annoying. By the way, what's that? I've never seen you with that before. Disrupting me out of my thoughts was Waylon, who pointed at my hand. Leaning forward to get a closer look, he silently muttered, "It looks like a regular metal pole. Anything special about it?" "Oh, this?" Raising my left hand, revealing the long metal stuff, I swung it around. Swish. With each swing, the air split apart, and a crackling sound similar to that of a whiplash would arise. It was pretty good. Putting the bottom end of the metal rod on the ground, I leaned on it slightly. Just something I looted from the place. Since I can't use my arm, I figured that this would do for now. Another reason why I chose to go to the artifact testing room was obviously because of the artifacts. That was a no-brainer. Since my right hand was currently out of action, I took the liberty of taking the metal staff artifact that the Duergar used against me. Although there were other artifacts, I did not choose them since they were either far too high in rank and would rapidly consume my mana or were utility-based. Which meant that they had no use in my current situation. Now that you've reminded me, take this. Remembering something, taking out a glove from my dimensional space, I handed it to Waylon. What's this? He asked with a pointed look. It's an S-ranked artifact that I picked up. I thought that it might be useful to you. An S-ranked artifact? Yes. I replied with a bit of struggle. If only I was a little bit stronger. Although it was an S-ranked artifact and I wanted it, because of my lack of mana and the fact that we were currently participating in a very important mission, I decided to hand it to Waylon. Of course, I was merely just lending it to him. There was no way I would give such a nice artifact for free. Just as I was about to give Waylon the glove, my hand paused. Lifting my head, I reminded. I'm just lending it to you, okay? You'll have to give it back after you're done with it. Waylon's brows twitched at my words. Snatching the glove from my hand, he commented in an annoyed tone, "You're a greedy one, aren't you? It's an S-ranked artifact, what do you expect?" Of course, I'm going to be greedy. The last time I checked, besides the fact that it increased the strength of the user, the artifact was also extremely durable and could block heavy blows from an enemy. It was both offensive and defensive, of course, I wanted it. Studying the glove in his hand, Waylon put it on. Once he put it on, the glove magically expanded to fit his hand. Clenching his hand repeatedly, Waylon nodded his head in satisfaction. It's not bad. I'm glad you like it. Trying my best to not look envious, I looked away from Waylon. Only then did I notice the corpse of the elder in the middle of the hall. My eyes instantly lit up. Turning to Waylon, I asked, "Are you not going to loot his body?" Since he was an elder, the Duergar must have had some good things on him. Perhaps a couple more S-ranked artifacts, maybe? Don't bother, I've already checked. All of his artifacts are bounded ones. Pouring cold water onto my hopes, Waylon put his sword away. We can't do anything about them as they are linked to his body permanently. I see. Although bounded artifacts were rare in the human world, they were a lot more common here in the dwarven domain. Malvol's disciple being an example, as his hammer was a bounded one. Should we get moving then? Since I now knew that the artifacts on the elder were bounded to his corpse, I quickly gave up on them and turned to face Waylon. Lowering his head to meet my eyes, Waylon asked in a serious tone, "Where to next?" "Dampening system," I quickly replied. There was no ounce of hesitation in my voice. Since there was another team currently headed for the surveillance system, there were only two places left to choose from: the security room that was responsible for the protective measures installed outside of the base and the room where the dampening system was located. Good idea. I was thinking the same. Waylon nodded his head in approval. Once we take care of the dampening system, communicating and coordinating with the others will be much easier. That's what I think too. The dampening system was responsible for blocking all frequencies and other methods that connected to the outside world. If we managed to destroy it, we'd essentially be removing the restrictions on communications and thus be able to communicate with Douglas, who was outside, as well as with the other group that was currently taking care of the surveillance system. Let's not waste any time and go now. Ultrich just finished as well, Waylon said as he saw that Ultrich was finally done taking care of the Duergars. Touching my tooth slightly, I briefly glanced in the orc's direction to make sure that he was okay. Waylon also seemed to have the same idea as me as he waited for Ultrich to come. "I'm here." "Good. Let's go." Once Ultrich was done and had arrived before Waylon, turning his head to face me, Waylon urged, "Ren, let's hurry." "Okay, give me a second." Nodding my head, I touched my face and made sure that the mask was properly sealed. Since the security system was still not down, I did not want to have my real face exposed in the open. Because I wanted to save mana, the mask I wore was just a regular skin mask. I had also removed the effects of the potion and was now back to my regular height. It definitely felt much better to be back to normal. "Ren." Waylon hissed. Coming," I answered while moving to him. Taking my hand away from my face, I followed Waylon and Ultrich deep into the hall. The dampening system's location awaited us. Thick threads of mana lingered in the air as thunderous explosions rang in the atmosphere. A multitude of colors flashed in the air as two different forces clashed against each other. The pressurized wind gales emerging from the point of collision between the two forces shot out towards a large army that stood below. This persisted for over 10 minutes as both sides mercilessly attacked each other, spreading chaos everywhere. KHH. Standing below, at the far end of the army, a blonde youth pushed his shield forward and blocked the wind gale that shot in his direction. Tensing his leg muscles, the youth's body stood rooted on the ground as the earth beneath his feet crumbled slightly. It was only after a whole minute had passed that the youth could finally relax. Lowering his shield slightly, he thought back at the attack just now. If what I just blocked was the residual energy from one of the clashes, I wonder how strong the real force is. As his thoughts paused there, he broke out into a cold sweat and shook his head. Let's not think about it. I'm still too far from that level. Just the thought alone sent shivers down his spine. What should we do? A soft voice entered his ears from behind him. Turning around, the youth, Hein, saw Ava look towards the distance, where the conflict was happening. Her delicate brows were tightly knit in a frown as her lips pursed into a small, worried pout. Are we going to fight soon? No. We wait for now. Answering her was Leopold. With his sword by the side of his waist and a gun in hand, he too was looking at the conflict happening above. Turning his attention away from the conflict, he looked back at Ava. For now, Rin told us to stay put. He said that he'll contact us when it's time. Before that, we are supposed to lay low. If you say so. Okay. Nodding his head, Hein did not say anything else and continued to stare at the battle in the distance. With every second that passed, the strength of the attacks on each side increased. The pressure bearing down on everyone increased by the second. We should get ready. Chugging down a potion, Hein closed his eyes and tried to recover as much mana and stamina as possible. He estimated that the real battle would start within the next couple of minutes. Before that happened, he wanted to be in optimal shape. He knew that compared to the previous one, this one was going to be a lot tougher and more dangerous. He could no longer take it easy. He wasn't the only one that understood that, as Ava and Leopold also got ready, each making their own preparations for the battle to come. Bang! Heek! Using the side of the large axe, Ulrich brutally smacked a Duergar by the side of the wall. His attacks held no grace or elegance, yet never lacked precision. They were pretty gory too, but at this point, I'd rather have efficiency and precision over what the aftermath looked like. This way. No longer bothered by such a scene, I ran through a large corridor. Of course, as I ran, I made sure to be in between Waylon and Ulrich. I wasn't naive enough to think that I could take the front or back. All I could do at the moment was direct the two in the right direction. Having already memorized the layout of the place, the task was a breeze for me. There it is. Before long, halting my steps, I pointed towards the distance.
Ah!
It looks like our plans have been read. But just as I was sure we had arrived, obstructing our path were several Duergars. Standing next to each other in a tight formation, they held their weapons while aiming in our direction. A multitude of spherical bundles of mana lingered in the air, converging towards their artifacts. To make matters worse, standing in the middle of the Duergars was a familiar figure, someone I didn't expect to see so soon. Durara. I muttered underneath my breath. One of the leading elders of Inferno, and an SS-ranked Duergar, Durara had made her appearance. Chapter 350, An Intense Fight, 1. Ren, stay back. Extending his hand towards my direction, Waylon pushed me back. His piercing, ice-cold gaze indifferently scanned Durara, who was standing opposite him. Holding onto a wooden staff double her size, a red orb deeply embedded at the very top of it. A soft, misty red hue shrouded the area around the staff, creating a mysterious feeling. A heavy tension enshrouded the hall as both sides were locked in an intense stare-off. Why Ying? In a smooth motion, Waylon took out his broadsword and pointed it in Durara's direction. Comparing the pressure he was giving off to Durara's, I could tell that he was weaker than her. In fact, it wasn't even a close match as his aura was swiftly getting suppressed by her. Waylon also seemed to know this fact as a never-before-seen look of seriousness marred his face. Without wasting any time, he channeled what little bit of mana he had recovered in his body towards the tip of the broadsword. His scion control is leagues above mine. I thought to myself as I observed him from the side. From how he managed to freely control the psions to reach a certain point of the broadsword unimpeded, I could understand just how capable Waylon was. But as Waylon was getting ready to fight, contrary to his expectations, Durara's attention wasn't directed toward him or Ulrich, who had still not made a move and was quietly observing Durara. Her attention was in fact directed towards me. Durara mouthed slowly, in a tone I couldn't quite place my finger on. This familiar aura. Her chilly voice traveled through the ears of everyone present as my face couldn't help but change slightly. Durara's expression turned from ice-cold to gloomy as her eyes that contained a faint black light shone even more fiercely. Her mind was slowly processing everything happening before her. Seeing that she was slowly figuring things out, raising my hand, I waved in her direction, in an almost mocking manner. "Hi." Having been paying close attention to me for the past week or so, she was already familiar with my aura. Although I could hide it, I didn't feel the need to do so anymore. She had already figured out what had happened, so there was no longer a need. Carl's role was done. He was no longer needed. Might as well piss her off to disrupt her mentality. It can't be. And no, it cannot be possible. Upon seeing me wave my hand in her direction, it finally dawned on her. A look of absolute shock and betrayal appeared on Durara's face as she tightened the grip on her staff. But it didn't take long for her to calm her emotions down. Her face returned to its usual cold and indifferent one. However, everyone in the room could feel the tangible bloodlust exuding from her body. She was angry. What a bummer. Seeing that my taunt did not work, I felt that it was a bit of a pity. If I had managed to provoke her into doing something stupid out of anger, we could have used that chance and capitalized on it. Too bad no such thing happened. I get it. I finally get what you guys did. Clever little trick. Every single one of her words chilled the very air as a palpitating and almost suffocating feeling blanketed the hall. VUAM. It was then that a murderous aura suddenly sprang out from behind her small body, in the form of an illusory red skull. Tightening her grip on the staff even more, Durara glared in my direction, directing the murderous aura revolving around her body towards where I was standing. "You will pay for what you've done." She cried out loud, her aura bursting forth in my direction like an unstoppable tsunami. Opening its mouth, the illusory skull shot in my direction at a terrifying speed. "Stay back, Ren." Pushing me further back, Waylon stepped forward and threw a regular palm in the direction of the skull. Though the palm looked just like an ordinary attack, it was anything but. Moments before it came into contact with the red skull, which was a tangible reflection of Durara's bloodlust, a small white glow enveloped Waylon's palm as the aura encircled his hand in a soothing, calm manner. Once the skull was only a few meters away from me, chopping his hand down, a large gap formed and the skull split apart as though it was made out of water. What followed after was a strong gale that messed up my hair and clothes, but other than that, I was completely fine. Humph. Seeing that her small attack had not worked, Durara snorted. She then proceeded to tap her staff on the ground once. Crack! Crack! Suddenly, the moment her staff touched the floor, everything beneath her feet completely shattered apart, revealing the rough ground underneath it. The broken tiles of the floor slowly rose in the air around her, encircling her very body. Thin threads of mana suddenly materialized around Durara, surrounding her completely. She raised her staff in the air, releasing a blood-curdling scream. "I'll kill you, traitor!" Her enraged shout reverberated throughout the whole building as a frightening power surfaced from above the top of the staff. Within seconds, a powerful ball of energy materialized in front of Durara as she pointed the staff in my direction. The ball then proceeded to levitate in front of her. High oak! But she wasn't done. With another high-pitched scream, the mana around Durara suddenly froze. Then, in unison, it agglomerated towards the ruby placed on top of the staff. All of this happened in a matter of seconds. By the time the mana had completely converged on top of the staff, a second had passed and one more ball appeared in front of her. While this was happening, the dozen or so Durgars weren't standing still. Aiming their weapons in our direction, they were also getting ready to fire at the same time. Soon, both sides were ready as a threatening energy expanded from their direction. With a grave look, Waylon looked to his side. "Ultric, can you handle her attack?" Leave it to me, Ultrich reassured. Being an SS rank himself, Ultrich was confident in defending against Durara's attack. Although he could feel just how powerful her attack was, he wasn't scared. Or, at least, that's how it looked to me. But as the seconds ticked by, the energy gathered at the top of her staff became more threatening and powerful. At this point, I could no longer quantify the power radiating from her attack. Huarg. Responding to her, Ultrich let out a deep shout. His voice resembled the furious cry of thunder as it reverberated throughout the hall, strongly shaking the surroundings. A devastating energy rooted deep within his body sprang out, enveloping him whole, like a thin veil. Taking a step forward, the floor beneath him cracked apart as fine, miniature crevices expanded from the area around his foot. His calf muscles tensed, revealing thick veins that threatened to pop out of his skin at any second. Ultrich painted a menacing visage. Noticing what Ultrich was doing, Durara's eyes became even colder. The enormous energy lingering atop her staff halted. Without saying anything, she lowered the staff at a 45-degree angle. The two spheres of energy revolving around her merged together to form an even larger, inconceivable mass of destructive mana that quickly shot it in our direction. A wild and violent energy swept the wind apart, forcefully tearing down anything in the hall. Durara's frightening attack caused Ultrich and Wayland's gazes to harden. However, Ultrich, who was standing at the front, did not dodge. Releasing the built-up energy in his calves, his body tore through the air at an extremely terrifying speed. Holding onto the large axe with both hands, he appeared right in front of the energy blast as though he had teleported. Because Ultrich moved faster than ever before, the axe was positioned lower, its head angled right below his waist. But this was no problem for him. Intensifying his grip on the axe, Ultrich's muscles bulged and he swung diagonally in an upwards manner. A thick red light surged from the tip of the axe and ruthlessly smashed against Durara's attack. The space around Ultrich exploded. Bang! A great force emerged from the head-on collision, causing Ultrich to get forced backward. A bright light shot outwards, and everything close to the epicenter of the collision disintegrated. The others around Durara and Ultrich were pushed even further back as a result of the aftermath. Fortunately for me, I had Wayland for support. A thin shield enveloped the two of us. Although we were not too close to the attack, I could see Wayland struggling to defuse the aftershocks of the collision. Staring at the ensuing battle, Wayland's face couldn't be any more serious. "This is not a fight I can interfere with," he silently muttered. Having witnessed the exchange that just took place, Wayland realized that the fight was far beyond his league. The gap between each rank grows as one gets closer to the top. I thought to myself. Compared to the previous elder we encountered before, she's in a different league. I could handle. I can't. What rank was the previous elder? I asked out of curiosity. Since I wasn't there, I had not witnessed the fight. Glancing at me from the corner of his eyes, Wayland softly replied, S+, borderline, SS-.
Ah.
I see. I guess I now understood why Wayland could take care of him. We can only hope that Ultrich can handle her. Wayland's expression was cold and indifferent as he stared at the Durgars standing behind Durara. Stabilizing their bodies from the aftermath of the explosion, they turned their attention towards us. Raising their weapons, they aimed them at us without hesitation. Taking a step forward, Wayland forcefully pushed me behind him. "Stand back, Ren. You're too weak to be of any use. You're just a burden at the moment." "Got it." Nodding in understanding, I heeded Wayland's words. Although he was a bit harsh, Wayland was correct. I didn't need to deny the truth. At my current level, I was just a burden. I had already finished my role. The rest was up to them. Bang, bang. Before I knew it, Waylon and the other Durgars had started fighting, multicolored lights surging in the air. I don't like this. Even though I knew that I had already completed my role, staring at the ensuing battles, a weird feeling bubbled up from inside me. I couldn't quite explain what I was feeling. Annoyance? Frustration? Helplessness, or a mix of all those? Just staring at the two of them battle and treating me as a burden did not sit right with me. I was long past my passive phase. I wanted to help. I wanted to ease their burdens, if even a little bit. This was obviously not because I felt compassion for them or any other emotions similar to it. I wanted to help them because I didn't want them to tire out and eventually lose later on in the operation. I also didn't like the feeling of being a burden. Just how can I help them without causing them more trouble? Crossing my arms and biting the nail of my thumb, the chip inside of my head started processing at full power. The last thing I wanted to do was try to help and end up making the situation worse. If I was planning on helping them, it had to be in a way that would actually help, not hinder. I needed to take into account all the variables and factors around me. But, just what can I do? Staring at the ensuing battle, and glancing at everything that was happening around me, my brows started to knit together. It wasn't long before something finally struck me as my eyes opened slightly. What if?